gonna kick off with my first question.
Yeah.
So with like the, I guess, business of like getting photos, developing photos, film and all that, I wanted to ask you what was like the thing that pushed you to kind of take it in your own hands? Because obviously there is like, franchises like Henry's Cameras or like, you know, certain like film developing
Yeah.
like services around sort of, but I want to know like what like I guess made you take it into your own hands and like actually follow through with it.
Yeah, for sure. So actually on the topic of Henry's, I used to work at Henry's.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so I went to school for 2 years and then started working at Henry's and all that kind of stuff. Uh, we Before I left, we ran into issues of having like 4 to 6 week turnarounds, which is now I think they're saying 12 to 16 weeks.
Wow.
And I could shoot like 50 rolls over a summer and not
Mm,
care as long as they're on my desk. But the second I drop them off, I'm like, is my film ready? Is my film ready?
yeah.
So I'm super impatient. I was like, I'm just gonna start doing it myself. And then I was like, I could probably offer this for other people, and like at the very least, fund my film habit. Like as long as I'm
Hmm.
making enough money to pay for the chemicals and pay for my own film, like that's cool, whatever. And it kind of blew up into way more than I had ever anticipated.
Okay, that's really cool because like I remember seeing your page and I initially thought like with the whole branding and everything of it, I thought like Film Co was just like a brand, like because it was like Niagara Film Co.
Yeah.
I thought it was like it was like a Toronto Film Co. This
Oh yeah,
place
no,
Film Co.
that's right. I never even thought about that.
That's
Yeah,
my
that makes
first
sense.
initial reaction was just like, oh, like it's a franchise. Then
Yeah, like
like
the Niagara
hearing like
branch or whatever.
yeah, the Niagara branch of it, yeah. So then
Yeah.
hearing people be like, oh, like um well, like this I know the guy who runs them. Oh, where like did he move here, did he do
Yeah.
whatever? Oh no, like he's been around, like it's just his own thing. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool. um
Yeah. It's just like I don't even know the name. Just like came. I was like Niagara Film Co.
it's
Okay, cool.
good,
I mean, that sounds
it's
professional, I guess.
yeah. So speaking on that though, I want to talk about what was the thing that you've ran into that was the most difficult when either you can kind of give all three when starting it,
Yeah.
while in the process of it, and right now. What are like the three, I guess, hardest things? So like the hardest thing when you first started out, the hardest thing like when you kind of got like got into it, and like the hardest thing right now, kind of dealing with the business or like even the process of film developing.
Yeah. So I don't. That's tough. Like, so starting generally, I feel like people would say like getting the name out there is going to be the hardest thing.
Hmm.
Working at Henry's, I was fortunate enough where people would come in and they'd say, "Oh, can I drop my film off?" I'd be like, "Yeah, it's going to be like 6 weeks," and they're like, "Oh my god, that's too long." I'm kind of like under the table, like, "Yo, I know a guy. He can get it done in like 2 weeks. Like, here's a card." So like that was
Hmm.
nice.
Yeah.
Um, but it was mainly just like finding. I'm gonna say the hardest thing to start was getting content to be able to post online, to be like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is like what we offer, versus being like just like a graphic or something like that, and like
Hmm.
having multiple different styles on there rather than just only my photos. That was probably the hardest thing. um During the process though, I run into a few snags. So I started it. When did I start? I started September of 2020. So this is like 6 months into the pandemic when things were still
Hmm.
pretty fresh, I guess you could say. Supply chains were rough. There's a ton of issues. I ran into a few times where I was like, I've got 20, 25 rolls sitting here that I need to develop, and I cannot find chemicals anywhere. All of my suppliers are
Oh,
out.
oh no.
Yeah, I would run into issues where like I would order chemicals, pay for the chemicals, and then a refund would pop up on my card, and I'd be like, "What the hell's going on here?" And I would have to reach out to the supplier, and they're like, "Oh yeah, sorry, like, you know, um, Henry's, for example, ordered it, and we had to fulfill them because they're a bigger contract. So I was like having chemicals pulled out from underneath me by bigger companies. So that was a struggle. So there was a lot of like, hey, it's a week turnaround. We're delayed. You're going to get your film in a couple weeks. So it was hard to keep that consistency going. Yeah, and it's hard because you're like promising people a quick turnaround, and then you're like, hey, it's actually going to be a couple weeks. Like, we're so sorry. So that kind of sucked. And then right now, the hardest thing is probably like, it's only me. I'm the only person here. I do the emails, the Instagram, the scanning, the developing, the everything, which is great because like I like having the full control over it. Like, if somebody's film gets screwed up, it's my fault. I can't blame anybody else.
You can't be like, oh, Steve, this guy, or Tommy,
exactly,
that guy did this.
Yeah, like I've had a few times where I had somebody help me out with scanning or whatever, and it isn't what I would want. So I'm like, I'm just going to do it myself, which is fine. But keeping up with all the orders, because now Henry's is sending people to me. I'm like,
really?
Okay, I've got a lot of film. Yeah. So,
oh my God.
Because I used to work there. Like, I know some of the people, and they're like, are you still taking orders? I'm like, yeah, I still am. So they're sending people to me, which is great. But now I've got, actually I'm sitting at my desk right now. I have 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, plus the 7 from the workshop. I've got like 45 rolls of film that I need to get through. And I'm like, that's a lot of film. So staying consistent and keeping on top of things and finding ways to obviously innovate and, do more than just send us your film, we'll develop it and send it to you. Like doing things like this workshop, or we just partnered with Lomography to sell their products, like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's the biggest thing, is like trying to find a way to grow.
It's kind of crazy that a chain, like, obviously you work there, you know people there, but even still, like, the fact that you're getting recommended by Henry's for a faster turnaround rather than them pushing their 12-week, 14-week film development just says a lot about your brand and stuff. And I want to know, what was the biggest thing you had to understand or overcome while owning a brand?
I would say probably running. The biggest thing to understand, I guess, is that you can't necessarily make everybody happy. Like, some people will send their film in, and we'll get a lot of our people are like Brock students or college students, I guess, that are taking photos in basement parties without flashes and then sending it to me, and I'm developing it, and a camera with 30 photos on it is producing 6 photos. And then they're like, oh, well, what happened to all my photos? And I'm like, unfortunately, you didn't have the flash going, or whatever caused the issues. So most of the roll was blank because it was way too dark. So having to understand that people aren't going to be happy about that, and navigating the customer support side of things, I guess. I've always been in retail or customer support one way or another. But now I used to be able to be oh, sorry, that's not me, speak to the manager, or contact customer support. But I guess now it's well, that's me.
Contact me, yeah.
Yeah, I'm customer support, I'm the manager, I'm everybody. So that's been the biggest thing to learn and get used to.
And it's kind of crazy that, again, with having to deal with all that on your own still, with the amount of influx that you're receiving, is there anything that has been helping you with this, or anything that you've been doing, when you start, compared to when you started out, the stuff you've been doing differently to kind of ease the process rather than feeling a heavy pressure on you to get all this stuff done all at once and answer all these emails and put out all these posts?
Well, I'm lucky enough that I guess maybe not lucky enough. I'm on my phone a lot, probably too much. So thankfully, it comes to with Instagram or emails and stuff, I can be pretty quick to respond to those, and that's not much of a task. When it comes to developing the film and scanning and all that, I've kind of learned to like schedule myself a little bit more and be like, okay,
Hmm.
I work because I still work a full-time job as well. So doing like,
Yeah.
12 to 8:30, I'm like, okay, I come home at 8:30. I can, develop maybe 10 rolls, let them dry, and then I'll scan them in the morning before I go to work. So that's been really helpful, like scheduling and planning things more versus just like doing it when I feel.
Hmm.
Which has also turned it into more of like a job, I guess, like
Not even a
almost
job,
like
it's just
shift
more
work.
so like you're just, I guess, like creating an agenda for yourself and like,
Exactly. Yeah.
so it's done like in a process where like for one, you're not missing any points or anything, like you're not messing up anything. Two,
Exactly.
you actually have the time to get the turnaround done, right?
Yeah. And then like most of the money that comes through Niagara Film Co. goes
Hmm.
right back into it. So like I started with a Patterson tank that could do 3 rolls at a time. I then
Yeah.
upgraded to one that could do 5 rolls. I've upgraded my scanning setup to be faster and more efficient. I've recently bought a machine that allows me to like I used to do it all by hand, so it'd be every 30 seconds I'd have to invert the chemicals and kind of keep an eye on it. So it was
Wow.
literally like 20 minutes of sitting there staring at a timer and every 30 seconds inverting it, which causes inconsistencies because it depends on how hard you invert or how fast. Like it was just ridiculous. I got
It
a
wasn't
machine
as
that does
accurate.
that. Yeah, it wasn't as accurate. So now I have a machine that does all the inversion process and all of that. It uses less chemicals. It's faster. That's why I was able to drop my prices. So that's been a saving grace because I can set the machine to run and prep the next batch, which is really good.
Wow. And the fact that you did it all by hand just shows kind of, I want to say, like, well, yeah, your determination with it to keep it going.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of people will have the idea for doing stuff like this, like having their own business and running something, and see how much like supplies they'll need. They'll just think they'll need like the best of the best, of course, and see everything they need and just kind of flake out because they think they can't afford it. But you literally took it by hand every 30 seconds for 20 minutes, and now you've grown to the point of having a machine that does it for you.
Yeah, that's the like that's actually a perfect example. Like people that like want to start a business or look into a business and they're like, "Oh man,
Mhm.
it's going to cost me way too much money to start up or the amount of work that's going to go into starting up." Like if you're willing to put that work in at the beginning, like if you're passionate enough to put that work in the beginning, after a certain amount of time, it's going to pay off where like eventually you can hire people to do those jobs for you. So you don't need to, or
Mhm.
buy a machine that makes it easier or whatever. So it's just like getting over that initial hump of being like, man, this is a lot of friggin' work. I'm tired. I'm miserable. I just worked a full day getting yelled at by customers and now I have to do this film or like whatever. But it also has to be something you're passionate about. So
Mm. I was gonna ask you, how do you keep kind of like your motivation through it all? Like, obviously, you do get some. I'm not gonna say I don't know if you've gotten any like negative feedback or negative like responses from clients, but you probably have because you've worked with a fair amount now. How do you keep like that kind of like drive when like like, you get like negative feedback from, let's say, a client that you thought everything went really well and you explained everything very thoroughly, everything was crystal clear, but then they just come back like with a 180 of like negative or just rude kind of email or call. How do you keep your motivation or like spirit high in those moments?
yeah, I think I think I've what's it called, like benefited from working in retail and stuff like that. Like you kind
Mm,
of just learn that sometimes like somehow you just can't make somebody happy. And it's very upsetting. Obviously, like you put your work into to developing the film or like scanning it and color correcting it or whatever, and like even sometimes going back and forth and talking with them and adjusting the scans or doing whatever, and they're still not happy in the end. You kind of just have to like look past that to the next thing. The biggest thing that like motivates me to keep going is we have a lot of really cool stuff come through. Like some photo, like I almost every time I do a batch of film, there's at least 2 or 3 photos in there that I go, damn, I wish I shot that, or like, where
Yeah.
is that? I want to go. So being able to see
Hmm.
those and create those and bring those images to life for people is the biggest thing. So I kind of just look at like the really good sides of those and kind of use that to counteract the not so great side. Thankfully, it doesn't happen too often.
That's good.
Not too many times.
All right, but I think we're gonna wrap things up on the podcast. If you want to tell people where to find you.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find my film developing business on Instagram at Niagara Film Co. Also, the website is niagarafilm.co. And then my personal, if you want to follow my photography at all, if you have any interest in that, is JR Kingdon. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right. Thank you for being on the podcast. It was a pleasure. I appreciate you for stopping by.
Yeah, thank you
Um,
so much for having me.
and if anyone is listening on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, we're also available on YouTube. And if anybody's watching YouTube, we're also available on those platforms. And for all the updates on the Talkly podcast, it's talklypodcast.com. We shall see you guys next week. Thank you.